Welcome back to the Crawford Lawcast. I'm here with Chris Crawford and our special guest, Escambia County Sheriff Chip Simmons. Welcome, Chip.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. So we were talking before we came on about how this has grown to what it is now, kind of the different evolutions. And I got to say, out of all the people we've talked to, I'm somewhat more nervous about this one than anyone else because there's so much I want to talk about. You know, we can spend a whole day talking about the ins and outs, telling good stories, that kind of stuff. But I think it's important, at least I think it's important, other people may disagree, that people know what you do, how important your job is, and how vast your job is. And I have told people, look, the truth is, I'm a criminal defense attorney, and people always say, well, you know, you must not like law enforcement. Not true. I got many of friends in law enforcement, and I was a supporter of you when you were running because I have a view of who I think, I have a view of what the best sheriff looks like, and to me, you were it. So I'm excited.
Yeah, that would have been useful information during the campaign. Huh?
Right.
I could have put that on a billboard.
Yeah, I'll sign an affidavit later on.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm happy to be here. You know, we got to know each other a little better during the campaign. We had some conversations, and I think we have some shared ideas. And you know, and we talked a little bit about, you know, you being a criminal defense attorney and me being in law enforcement, but it's all about fairness. It's all about, you know, doing the right thing.
Yeah, the way I see it is we work in the same system, and at the end of the day, no one would say a better Pensacola is a bad thing.
Right.
I mean, we all want a better Pensacola. I would love for everything to work as best as it can. And the reason that I was a big proponent of you, and the way I've always described you to people who ask me questions, who we should vote for, I say Chip's a cop's cop. I mean, you started in law enforcement, you've worked your whole adult career in law enforcement, so you've seen essentially the good and the bad of how to do it. You know, starting from, we would call it a deputy, but you were with PPD, you were with the Pensacola Police Department,
Right.
So you started as essentially an officer. Before that, you did corrections to get to the officer position,
Right.
which doesn't happen nowadays, but we'll talk about that too. And then you worked your way up. I mean, I didn't know it, but Mike was telling me that it was 9 years before you made essentially sergeant over at the Pensacola Police Department.
Right. Yeah. When I started in law enforcement in the mid '80s, you know, we had career people there that stayed a lot longer than what they seem to stay now. So when I started, I remember sitting in the muster or the lineup room at the Pensacola Police Department, and there was like one rookie. That was me. And it was little Chip Simmons here, and all these people, and they all looked like my grandfather. They were all older because they all had 15, 20, 25 years on, and they weren't retiring as soon as they could. So yeah, it took a long time because seniority mattered at the Pensacola Police Department for promotional process. I believe that the average time it took an officer to get promoted to sergeant was like 15 years. And so I was able to do it actually eight, little under 9 years. So everyone kind of called me the kid,
Right.
You know, whenever I was a rookie sergeant. So you're absolutely right. It's just a matter of working your way up and going through those learning experiences.
So where are you originally from?
Well, I'm from here. I wasn't born here. I was born on a Navy base in Keflavik, Iceland. My father was in the Navy, and that's what brought us to Pensacola. And so that's why the Pensacola and the Navy, you know, the connection there is so near and dear to my heart, because I would not be in Pensacola if it weren't for my father's Navy career. And that's what kind of got me started to want a career in uniform service. You know, originally
Understood.
it was law enforcement.
Right.
I mean, originally it was military, and then ultimately it was law enforcement. So, you know, I started when I was 19 years old. I applied at 19. I got a job at the sheriff's office under Sheriff Vince Seeley as a corrections officer. I had been in a motorcycle accident and I wasn't 100% yet, so I couldn't be on the road. And so they put me in as a corrections officer, and I spent about 1 year and 10 months there before I moved into the Pensacola Police Department.
So your dad being Navy, you've probably had the same kind of upbringing that I did, where your hair was always high and tight.
I looked like I was in the Navy too.
Right, exactly.
Or probably the Marines more
16-year-old
than,
people
yeah.
thought you were a Marine.
Yeah.
That's very much the same kind of upbringing I had. I remember going to Pilchers almost every 2 or 3 weeks, and it was the same haircut, the buzz. You know, it's just how good of a buzz I got that time is how good of a haircut I got. So you went to where high school? When
Yeah.
when someone says, "Where are you from?" and the answer is Pensacola, the next question is always, "Well, what high school did you go to?"
Because you got to prove it.
Right.
You got to prove you're really from Pensacola.
Right.
So I go back a little farther. I went to Bellevue Elementary, Bellevue Middle, and then Pine Forest High School.
Okay.
So yeah, I can prove my upbringing.
Right. Well, to me, when the question comes out, what high school did you go to? They're already kind of like prejudging you depending on what it is. If you say Gulf Breeze, people have this image. Oh, well, your parents must have had decent money and you must have been surfing your whole life and yada yada. And you say Tate, or, oh, you must have been farming since you were 3.
Yeah.
It's this, and to me, I think it's one of the greatest things about Escambia County is we have this insane diversity in our area. You go from farms to city,
Right.
in one very large county. People may not understand how big the county is. So you're in high school. Did you play sports?
I did. I played football, and ran track a little bit, but mostly I was a football kid, and
Gotcha.
so I played all 4 years at Pine Forest High School.
When you get out of high school and you're making the decision to go into law enforcement, basically the uniform service as you described it, did you have a decision of which one you wanted to go to?
Well, at the
Police
time,
versus
yeah, I don't think it was as easy to get a job back then. I'll give you an example. I mean, when I applied at the Pensacola Police Department, the testing was done at Pensacola Junior College at the time, and it was inside their gym, and we had hundreds of people, and then we had to do a running test, we had to do a written test, we had to do a swimming test, we had to do all this stuff, and then you got placed onto a list. I finished like 10th or so, and it seemed like they only hired 5 or 6 at a time out of maybe 150, 200 people even. And some of these people didn't pass the written portion of the test, so they fell by the wayside, and others didn't do quite as good on the physical thing. But I was right out of high school. I was right out of football practice, so and then I went to work in corrections. And by the time I finished corrections academy at Pensacola Junior College, then I had already applied at the Pensacola Police Department because, like you said, did you decide Pensacola Police Department versus the Escambia County Sheriff's Office? And those were the only two that I really considered because I was a hometown boy.
right.
And the Escambia County called me first, corrections, and then I applied again to the police department because I didn't want to stay in working the corrections my whole career. I wanted to go ahead and move over. I learned a lot as a corrections officer, but I went ahead and applied to Pensacola Police Department. I was lucky they called me pretty quickly.
So when I came to Pensacola and I first started, you can say, my career in criminal defense, the one thing that was unique back then is a lot of people who wanted to be deputies, they had to start in corrections because at that point in time, the sheriff was essentially the manager and owner of the jail. And people didn't understand. People would think, oh, that guy's a correctional officer. He's not a real deputy. No, they're the same thing.
Right.
That was kind of the to me, it was almost like the proving ground. And I thought it was the best way to do it because when you're there, you're developing skills of interacting with people. And that was
Right.
very important, right? Because a lot of times in law enforcement, you're going to interact with people you may not really want to interact with, but that's your job. You're called there to respond. So I was always a big fan of people starting at corrections to see, this is a part of the process. You make decisions. This is where people are going to end up. And then that kind of, changed. But did you have the same feeling that starting there helped?
It absolutely helped. It wasn't a requirement when I came on board at the sheriff's office. Like I said, I was riding a motorcycle as a young man, and I got run over by a car. I broke my leg, my arm, my jaw. And so I was unable to run and complete things. So it was felt by everyone that it was better if I started corrections, and because you could work at corrections at the time longer without going to the academy, the corrections academy. And so I went there, and I tell you that you're right. They had, they would at the time they would rotate deputies from the road to the corrections, and then if you were cross trained, you could go back to the road. And at the time, it seemed like there was no concern at all for not being a certified corrections officer. You could put a deputy over there, and no one seemed to care. But you couldn't go the other way. You couldn't be a corrections officer, and you had to be a state certified law enforcement,
Right.
With a sworn powers of arrest. And so I started looking around, and a lot of people that were there with me were sworn deputies. And I thought, way back in line here, and I could my quicker route was to go to the city. So what I learned was, you're again, I was a 20-year-old kid, thinking I knew all the answers, and you find you're in there with 40 or 50 hardened criminals, and then, I mean, a lot of them were not convicted, but many of them were, and they were mixed and matched. And so, yeah, you learn how to talk to people. You learn how to treat people with respect. Because again, I was just a kid. I was
Right.
20 years old, and so it really helped me. I will tell you that some of the relationships, they remembered when I was on the street. When I got to Pensacola Police Department, a lot of people that I talked to, some of the people that were even informants of mine, were people that knew and trusted me from my days as a corrections officer. And to this day, even the co-workers that I had at the Escambia County Jail at the time are still friends of mine. I mean, I wasn't the only one. There were several of us that started off in corrections, as you mentioned, and I would tell you that I don't know that I can adequately give you the value of working in corrections before I went law enforcement, but it certainly helped me out.